So thank you for joining us on this Saturday. How to save energy at home. We've got quite a bit of information to go through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my video off and we'll get cracking. I guess everyone can see the presentation now. I'm hoping that's the case. If I can get a bit of a nod from a head or two here or there. Yes, I can see the presentation. Great. Okay. All right. So I'm going to minimize my screen. We'll get cracking. So how to save energy at home. There's a few different areas that we're going to look at today. So step number one, we're going to talk about finding the best energy deal, because that's a real sort of simple and direct method by which you can start saving. Also, we're going to go through a lot of information about how to change, things that you can do in your home, whether it's a rented house or whether it's your own home that you own and you have the capacity to make all the changes that you wish. And then we're going to do a little bit of a talk through about solar power and the sort of there's a bit of information there, some basic information about solar. You'll have a look at the bottom of the screen there. It says, look for the renter's tick. So that's the kind of stuff that we just sort of encourage you to consider for those who are renting, where you might not have so much control over the other elements in your home. Okay, so a little bit about us. The organisation that is presenting this with Council today is the Australian Energy Foundation, and we have a bit of a mission. The idea is that we'd like to help everybody in Australia to work towards an equitable zero carbon society. So a lot of organisations in our sort of model would be called not-for-profits, but we sort of count ourselves as an organisation with a purpose. So we say we're a for-purpose organisation, and we're here to help all Australians to take that journey. And the idea is that we'd like to help you to understand how to make your home more energy efficient. We intend to be able to produce and provide for you really good, clear advice, trusted and independent advice. That's our goal. And of course, we've gone through a very stringent vetting process. So the idea is that we've gone and looked for suppliers in the Sydney region, and we've asked them to provide us with information about their service. We've looked at them diligently, and we've really narrowed down the field to just a few suppliers that we would really confidently recommend to you. So that's the way that the Australian Energy Foundation works. Let's get onto the information here about how to save some money, learn a bit about us. So to begin with, there's a few services that you can go and use to compare electricity prices. And I've got to say, it's really, really in your interest to do so. Now, if you're not a particularly computer-friendly person, if you find the internet a little bit of a challenge, then get someone with you who can help you go through this process. But what you need is an electricity bill. And ideally go to this website, energyswitch.service.nsw.gov.au. So this is a state government website that does a comparison between various energy suppliers. And the idea is that you put some information in off your electricity bill, your postcode, the amount of kilowatts or megajoules of gas you're using, and then you can actually use the website to help you shake down the list of all the suppliers to show you who's the most affordable. And so quite often, we've sort of come through a sort of energy transition in the last decade or so in New South Wales, where power companies have been sold off, and those sort of utility services have changed a bit. They've changed names, they've changed brands, and a lot of people are still with the same company that they were with some years ago, despite the name changing. And what we find is that those sort of 3 or 4 large players in the market, they tend not to be offering the cheapest deals. Now, because the market's deregulated now, the service that you're buying, whether it's gas or electricity, it's the person you're buying it from is a retailer. And that retailer is effectively like a shop. It's a case of, are you buying your milk from the corner store? Are you buying it from the IGA in your little local shopping strip? Or are you going to one of the big shopping centres and going to one of the larger retailers and buying it from a supermarket? It's still just milk. And the milk isn't actually being produced necessarily, in some instances, but for the most part, the retailer you're buying it off is actually just selling a product that they've bought elsewhere. They're buying it wholesale, they're selling it to you retail. So apart from like checking out how the plans are laid out, and that's something that you can sort of get to know by using this website. If you want to learn about the companies themselves, you can actually go online and read up who they are. Who is Red Energy? What is this company that's advertising all the time? Well, that's just the new name for the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme. New South Wales and Victorian government built that originally. So that's who Red Energy is. You know what I mean? So you can learn about these other companies by looking at them. So going to a website like energyswitch.service.nsw.gov.au, bring your electricity bills with you when you do that process. shake it down and find out who's offering the best deals. So I'd say, there's, quite easily, if you've not been through that process, you can very easily save even hundreds of dollars a year just by looking at a different supplier. There's also a federal government website called Energy Made Easy. But what I would do is advise you to avoid the ones that come up in the search engines, because there are a lot of private companies that do this. And some of them are actually being sponsored by a few of those big power companies. And so they'll take you on a loop through 2 or 3 different service providers, but they actually all bring you back to the same energy supplier effectively. So I definitely recommend going through either the state government or the federal government one, and there's the state government one in there on the screen. So please make a little bit of time. It may be that you have to come back and do it a couple of times, but it's in your interest to do so. Let's talk about the things that you can do in your home. That's the stuff that you have immediate control over, and some of those are short-term and some of them are long-term things. So what I want you to do is to have a little look at this graph, and you can see that that's the sort of the pie chart there on the left. Talks about the sort of major energy uses sort of broken up. So there's been a lot of energy audits done in the last 10 to 12 years, and so we have some fairly good information about how much energy goes into various appliances in people's homes. It's not exacting information, but there's been enough audits done that you can quite confidently say today the largest energy users are heating and cooling, followed by hot water. Then there's a sort of a whole plethora of other appliances that we now use, electronic gadgets, TVs, computers, etc. And then fridges and freezers, lighting, which has reduced a bit over time, which is great, cooking, standby power. So you can see the whole range there. And what we're going to do is we're going to step through those sort of major areas, and along the way, I'll stop it occasionally and we'll be able to ask a question here or there. So heating and cooling. This is such a lovely image, isn't it? That's what you want on a cold day, isn't it? To be snuggled up under a blanket with a cup of tea. Okay, let's have a look at. There's three ways that you can make a difference on your home insofar as the energy efficiency goes and how your home travels energy-wise. So first of all, sort of draft proofing, sort of try to stop the gaps and the cracks, the leaky air that's coming in and out of the home. It really makes a big difference. And although it's a sort of very fine job where you're just achieving a small amount in each spot, it pays off. Insulation's another obvious one, and insulation is a big player insofar as how your home travels, whether it's summer or winter. Insulation makes a vast difference on how well your home manages the temperatures internally. And then window coverings. And so it's, we all sort of understand that, hot western sun or a window that's coming in from the south and never gets any sunlight is always cold. So let's talk about those areas. To begin with draft proofing, this diagram, it's used in a lot of training journals and things for people in my field. This is actually, like an example of all the different gaps and cracks that you find in a typical bungalow. And it may not quite apply like this in a unit or an apartment, because often, you've got neighbours immediately joined up to some of those common walls, etc. However, there are still a number of small gaps and cracks around things like, you can see bottom right hand corner, there are gaps where pipes penetrate through the walls. There's often gaps through there. People have gotten right into things like downlights, and so if there's sort of ceiling spaces or voids, there can be energy loss through those. And then naturally just, around windows and doors and those kind of places. So there's a whole bunch of things we can do to treat these. And while you say to yourself, yeah, it's probably not that much to deal with, and we live in a pretty temperate climate here in Sydney, maybe, much of the year we don't have to worry about it. But in that really cold part of winter and in that really hot part of summer, which seems to be growing, then it is worthwhile chasing down these very small gaps and cracks. I'll show you how. So to begin with, you see the picture on the left there. There's a door, and if you look at it closely, the little gap on the far left-hand side of the door, it's a tiny gap. It's just an itty-bitty tiny gap. But when you go over to the far side, it's a much wider gap. How does that happen? Well, over time, the amount of traffic that's walked through that door, gradually the doorstep's actually wearing away. And so, this is really common. Old doors and windows eventually over time begin to wear the treads themselves under the door in this instance. And how do you treat that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The picture in the middle shows a classic kind of raven strip. These kind of aluminium strips, they have an adhesive, or some of them, the more complicated ones, because there's about 20 in their range. It's amazing. They have different ways that they attach to the back of the door. But the idea is it's going to stop the air traveling in and out from under that door. So it's a small gap in a lot of places, but if you add that to the other bits and pieces around the home, it starts to tally up. And you can see on the right there, there's an image of someone putting in, it's a kind of adhesive tape. On one side of the adhesive, it's just the sticky. The other side is a bit of sponge. They tend to be about a centimetre or less in width. And just a few millimeters thick. And the idea is that you open the window or you open the door and you find the ledge that the door closes up to. You don't want it to be on the part where the door swings by, but actually the point where the door closes hard against the surface or the window closes hard against the surface. And you put this tape in. It's something you can do yourself, and it just stops all those sort of small air gaps, because gradually over time, windows and doors, you know, they start to distort, they wear and they warp. So with heating and cooling, they expand and contract over the years, and gradually you develop more and more gaps. And so, you know, these kind of small jobs, and they're a nice little sort of handy person kind of job, easy to do. And you can see, you know, renters here, there's a bit of a renter's tick here. In some instances, you know, you may have to approach your body corporate, but for a lot of the simple things, you know, some people even do the really simple thing with a door. For instance, it might just be to roll up a towel or get yourself a door snake. So those kind of things help too. Let's have a look at the floorboards. So the picture on the left shows the skirting board. It's a lovely wide white skirting board there, and you can see someone's come along and maybe they've lifted off the old floor surface and they've polished the floorboards. There's some pretty significant gaps between those floorboards. So when you first put timber down, it's got a higher moisture content. It's expanded, and then gradually over the years it dries out and shrinks up until you end up with more gaps and cracks. So how do you treat that? Okay, so if we have a look at the gap between the floorboards and the skirting board on the left, there's a product there. It's got a yellow tab at the top. It's actually a plastic bag. It's a little bit hard to see in a white background, but what it is, it's a length of sort of polystyrene tube. It's like polystyrene. It's a little bit more flexible, maybe more like a stiffened foam, I guess you would say. And the idea is you just sort of work that into those gaps with a blunt knife. And that just stops the air from flying up between that skirting board and the floorboards. The blue canister there is a classic kind of caulking canister. You just, you get them from the hardware. They come in all different colors and shapes, all different colors, I should say. And the idea is you just, take the little plastic nib off the end and screw on a little nozzle. There's a little tiny thing called a caulking gun, which is just a trigger action device. And you can go along and fill small gaps with that. And you can buy it in the same color to match your floorboards, etc. And of course, the picture on the far right there just shows a rug on the floor. So if you've got a bit of a part of the floor that has a few sort of where the floorboards have opened up a bit and there's gaps, and sometimes even just a rug on top can make a good difference, So that's the kind of stuff that renters can approach easily. If you actually just for a second, take a look at that rug on the right-hand side. Let your eyes train to the end of the picture. You can see a doorway there and a couple of doors with some light curtains. It's interesting. We can see the gap between the doors. There's a fine amount of light coming through there. And that's the perfect place to put some of the adhesive with the sponge on it, where it can actually close up those little gaps. And that's what we have in our homes, lots of gaps. And if you added them up, you'd end up with a hole the size of a football in the wall. If you were sitting in the lounge room, you look across and you say, wow, there's a hole in the wall as big as a football. I better treat that. But when it's a whole bunch of very small gaps, we tend to forgive it. We just kind of ignore them. But, if you go along and take the effort to close them off, you can really make a difference. The next topic is insulation. So in some instances, and certainly if you're in an apartment or flat, sometimes this is the kind of stuff where you have to get to your, those people who are living on the top floor, for instance, have to get approval through, body corporate or permission through the strata. But it's such a worthwhile endeavor. We're talking about, as much as 40 to 50% of your energy bills, insulation can really trim that by holding it in. It's like a doona over your head. Over 30% of the energy coming in and out of a room, 40% of the energy will be going out through the roof. And if you have the opportunity to get into the wall cavities as well, older homes in Australia haven't really been, when we built them, energy was cheap. And so, houses were built as sort of cheap as they could be. People tended not to insulate older houses. They didn't insulate the roofs or they didn't insulate the walls. We've come along and we were able to go back and retrofit the ceiling pretty easily. Walls are a little trickier, but it is a worthwhile endeavor if you're going through and doing any kind of renovation work. Basically, the thing that's also changed is that we're seeing the actual standards for looking after insulation and managing that sort of heat exchange in your home. We've seen those standards increase. And so it used to be homes were maybe rated, a ceiling insulation might be R2.5 and walls might be R1.5. Well, all of that has increased in the last few years. So the layer of insulation that you have, if it's before 2010, chances are, the new standards would say it's time to revisit it and time to add a bit more insulation. And it can be done pretty simply. You can add stuff on top, or in some instances, you can actually remove the existing stuff and put new stuff in. But adding stuff on top is fine too. We've got a guide on our website, and we'd encourage you to hop on our website and make use of it. The service that we provide, the council links with us with, that's there for you 24/7 online. And we also have a phone number, and I'll come to a bit more about the sort of contacting us at the end. But there's a great guide there about insulation. You're welcome to go and use that, and please make use of those resources available to you. Another option is to talk about window coverings. Now, a portion of energy passing through your windows, it's pretty significant, and we really notice this in winter. And you can see the picture on the far left. It's talking about having a good thick curtain. And why is a good thick curtain? Well, we know that it can be sort of anywhere between about 25 and 35% of energy in homes can pass through windows, passing through glass. So I'm not talking about an open window. I just mean energy transferring through the glass. And so the idea here is that you want to try and contain that. If you're in a position to put up curtains, and you can get yourself some good thick curtains, a curtain with a good lining at the back can make a great difference. The picture on the left shows that this particular room, the curtain goes all the way to the floor, which is great, and it also goes all the way to the roof. That's not always the case. Often curtains are sitting on rails and they're somewhat down from the ceiling. One of the things that we encourage you to think about is having an enclosed pelmet. So the picture on the left just shows the pelmet right up near the roof. Great. So no air is able to travel up above that pelmet and back down behind the curtain. But if you have a classic kind of, curtain that sits out on a, set of little, the rails sit somewhat out from the wall, what happens is when you put heat in a room, the heat rises because of convection, it rises to the ceiling and it starts to work its way down the room from the top. If it has the opportunity to roll over the top of the curtain rail and down behind the curtain, warm air is then going to go sliding past the glass. And as it does, it's going to start transferring through the glass to the outside. It will then be replaced by cold air. And the cold air will simply fall in through the bottom of the glass, replacing that warm air. And what you end up feeling is you can do this. Next time there's a good cold evening come around, put your hand at the bottom of the curtain. It feels like there's a draft falling on your hand, and all that is cold air falling into the bottom of the room while the hot air is pouring out through the glass up above the curtain and back down. And so that's why we talk about having an enclosed pelmet. The pelmet is just the bit that covers the front of the rail. It's kind of like really hiding the mechanism. But an enclosed pelmet has a lid on it. It stops air from transferring over the back. And that's a really worthwhile endeavor. And it can be done really simply. You can do something as simple as just using a good thick layer of cardboard. Cardboard is enough to act in that role. Okay. The same applies for summer, of course. The more energy that comes in through the glass. Now, to give you a bit of an idea, 1 square meter of glass in the sun represents 1 kilowatts worth of heat. That's like a 1 kilowatt, like a little small radiator on 1 square meter of glass. So, a typical glass door, might be, half a meter wide and 2 meters high. Well, we're talking about a square meter there, a kilowatt of energy pumping in through that glass. So trying to contain that is really going to make a difference. Now, a good thick curtain is going to at least keep the heat up against the glass. You're going to make a little hot box between the curtain and the glass, but at least that heat isn't radiating so readily into the room. If you have a look on the far right there, there's a lady, she's installing a temporary plastic film. This is good in the winter. It is a bit of a temporary. I wouldn't suggest it's a long-term solution, but the idea here is you're kind of creating a double glazing. It's a plastic film. You put this adhesive around the frame of the window, and then you stick this plastic on and you warm it up with a hairdryer and it shrinks up tight and it acts like double glazing. Yeah, it's kind of really cool. So if you're a renter, it may be that you need to talk to your landlord, or it may be that there are strata sort of requirements about matching in with colours, etc. So it's something to consider. If you're talking about heating, and I know we're running towards summer really, so this is starting to look like off-season advice. What we can tell you quite confidently now is there's a whole range of these sort of personal heating appliances. So I can tell you something like these heated throw rugs. It's kind of like a plush electric blanket. It's something really, really comfortable. You can pull it over yourself, sit it on the lounge. The great thing about them is the heat is directly on the person rather than trying to heat a whole room. And that makes a big difference. There's also heated pads. So these kind of things might be something you sit or you put behind your back. And there's also heated mats that go on the floor under your desk, because often, the very bottom of the house, the floor area of the house is the coolest. And there's a range now of heated clothing. Now, for me personally, I don't know if I'd be wearing that vest. It seems to me it's going to heat in the middle of your belly and perhaps up under your ribs. Well, no, that's just an example of the wiring. So sorry about that silly sense of humor there. Basically, what I'm going to tell you about these kind of devices is they really don't cost very much. They really don't use a lot of power. And the outcome is the heat is directly on the person where they need it. And that's much more efficient than trying to heat a whole room. Insofar as heater running costs, you can see there's a bunch of different appliances there. So there's a sort of classic kind of fan heater on the left and the column heater on the bottom left. Those devices and another one down the bottom here, convection heaters, about 50 cents to run. Your classic old electric element heater up the top there at 73 cents. It's just really an electric coil. You punch electricity into it and the coil tries to resist it. They're not very efficient. And they're the things that sort of turn up out the front of, as soon as a cold snap comes around in sort of April, suddenly the supermarkets have got pallets of them. They're selling them cheap. But unfortunately, the running costs of them are much higher. Top right-hand corner there, it's gas, 31 cents an hour. Gas has traditionally been a very affordable way to keep yourself warm. However, the price of gas has gone up. Why? Well, we're selling gas overseas at a very high price. The gas companies are fetching good money overseas. Why would they sell it to Australians cheap when they can get a better price for it? Gas is a little bit out of our control, the price of gas. So the outcome is a lot of homes are now moving. They're transitioning away from gas. And what's the final solution? Well, our advice is bottom right-hand corner, the ducted reverse cycle the split system reverse cycle air conditioner. That enables you to control the energy in a single room or maybe in a larger room. And the idea here is that now the air conditioning sort of businesses, the larger companies have finally sort of, a few years ago, they stepped up to the plate and said, no, we can actually make these things run more efficiently. And they do. They're vastly more efficient than they were 10 years ago and, incredibly efficient compared to, 15 years ago. So about 18 cents per hour to run reverse cycle aircon. Good for heating and good for cooling. You get a thing called a coefficient of performance, the amount of energy you push in to a reverse cycle air conditioner is amplified because it uses a compressor and a refrigerant gas, and it exchanges that energy with the air on the outside. So that's what the box on the outside does, and the box on the inside delivers it into the home. So reverse cycle air conditioning is definitely the most affordable option. Let's talk about the impending summer. Hello, we had a pretty warm summer. That was pretty hectic, and now summer's here, coming on again. A couple of pleasant days today, but we're going to see more heat coming around. Let's look at the running costs of these things. Your classic fan, a plain old, a fan on a standing fan or a desk fan, or even a ceiling fan. Fans use a small amount of power to run. And, the idea here is you just move air across the surface of your skin. And why does that benefit you? Well, the simple biology of our bodies is that when we get warm, the pores in our skin open up and moisture passes through them. And as that moisture evaporates off our skin, we're left with a cooling effect. That's how our bodies regulate temperature naturally. So if you're able to pass air across the wind, then that process happens more quickly. You feel cooler as a result of air passing by. Now, that doesn't work when we get to the very sticky end of summer. When we're sort of wandering around in February and it's high humidity and you're dripping with sweat from the moment you hop up in the mornings. Okay, so fans, they still help, but unfortunately they're often pushing moist air around. So that's where they sort of start to fall down a bit. The device on the bottom left-hand corner is an evaporative, it looks like it's a portable air conditioner, yeah. And so they're not too bad, but unfortunately they often exchange a bit of energy in the room. Here we are again at the bottom, you can see the reverse cycle air conditioner. Good options all the way down to 18 cents. Top right-hand corner, That one's an evaporative cooler. And those ones are basically, it's a fan and it has a kind of material inside, and you pour water into them. At the top, there's a canister, and the material is on a little roll and it dips into the water, and then it lifts up in front of the fan, and the fan pushes the sort of moist air out into the room. Again, really good, especially if you live on the other side of the mountains, the sort of central west and, you know, other drier parts, dry climates where you don't have humidity. That's all they have. They don't have reverse cycle air conditioners. They just use evaporative coolers. But unfortunately, you know, these are good in the dry part, the spring end of summer, but not so good in the sort of damp part. In the bottom right-hand corner, what you're looking at is a picture of a ceiling vent from a ducted air conditioning system. Now, a lot of big new homes are built with ducted air conditioning, and ducted is amazing, but often very energy hungry. And unfortunately, when they're designed and installed, it tends to cost a bit more to separate them into different zones. And what happens is often people, you know, been to homes, done lots of energy audits where people have gone, yes, we've got ducted aircon. I go, oh, how many zones do you have? Oh, they have 2, upstairs and downstairs. And, you know, if you just with one person in the house and they go, oh, I'm just going to heat up or cool down downstairs. You know, unfortunately, you know, modern open plan living, there's a whole lot of energy just going upstairs anyway. And so the ducted air conditioning systems tend to be a bit expensive. We really encourage people, if you have the capacity to go down that path of installing a really efficient split system, a reverse cycle air conditioning. Now, the other thing that I want to say, if you've got fans, then on a hot day, the first thing you should do is turn the fans on. Don't worry about turning the air conditioner on. You don't need to have the air conditioner on first up. Turn the fans on. We tend to have that sort of cooling effect overnight where the energy off the previous day has evaporated off and you've got that cool in the morning. Get your fans running. Now, as the day heats up and you're starting to go, oh, I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable, that's when you bring the air conditioner in, but you leave the fan running. If the fan's running, it's going to help distribute the cool air around. And then once you feel pretty comfortable, then you can turn the air conditioner off or change its temperature setting so it doesn't need to come on as often. That might mean pushing the temperature setting up. And then the fans stay on throughout. And in fact, you can leave those fans running overnight unless you get a chill from them. But fans use such a small amount of power. They're really worthwhile. So the big ceiling fan there in the middle, you know, a classic ceiling fan running at full speed might be as much as 65 or 75 watts. You know, that's like just a classic old incandescent light bulb. That's not a lot of power. And you feel like you're under a helicopter when they're running at full speed, so you tend to back them off, 45 watts. You might back them down so they're just stirring, 25 or 30 watts. Very small amount of power, very cheap to run. So our advice is fans go on at the start of the day and they can stay on all day. Bring the air conditioning in as you need it. Okay, so some basic good heating and cooling habits. Let's talk about that. Basically, heating and cooling, the idea is to try and just manage the space that you need to heat and cool. Don't do the whole house. You know, close up rooms that you don't need to treat. If it's a spare room or a laundry or something that you're not using for that period of time, close it. It may be that you even, you know, consider a hallway. Oh, do I actually need to heat or cool the hallway? No. So it might be that you can work towards, you know, some sort of setting up a curtain rod, or perhaps even enclosing a sort of doorway up the hallway. That kind of thing can really help. So what we call zone, you close down the amount of spaces that you're working on. Now, heating wise, we encourage you to stick to lower temperatures when you're heating a house. And the lower temperatures are 18 to 20 degrees. Now, that's not a prescription. It's just a recommendation. For some people, like, are you kidding? You know, that's not nearly warm enough. And it really depends on your age and how your body works and how mobile or how much you move around. There's a great variation from person to person. But what we recommend is when you're heating a room, especially if you're getting down to sort of like 0 degrees outside or a few degrees on a cold winter's morning, 18 to 20 is pretty comfortable. But going for the higher temperatures of like 24 to 26 on a winter's day means you're really working the device hard. So we say go for a sort of a lower temperature in winter. 18 to 20 is what we recommend. Now, it's the reverse for summer. We say push the temperature gauge up. You want to be going 24 to 26 degrees. You want the air conditioner to be providing you comfort. You don't want to be walking around in your own home like it's a chill box. You know, save that for going down to the supermarket and buying yourself an ice cream or hanging around next to the dairy section for a while. No, you know, the temperatures that you want for summer have to be higher. And so we say that as the summer gets warmer, now we're going to get our first couple of hot days. We had one, you know, just a week or so back. And you go, oh, I'm melting, it's 30 degrees. Well, that's because our blood has thickened up over winter, and the first bite of really warm weather starts to jump us, and our body's not ready for it. But in the months that come ahead, our blood's going to thin out, and we're going to find the temperatures easier to deal with. Now, when we get around to the very hottest part of summer, towards the end of January, from Christmas through to the end of January, before the moisture comes through, we're going to think 30 is a nice day, because the 38s and the 40s or the 42s, they're going to really bite us. So 30 becomes a pleasant temperature, because by then our blood will have thinned out and we're coping better. The simple advice is move the thermostat up. 24 degrees, maybe at the start of summer, and keep pushing it up. By January, you're heading for 25, and maybe by February 26, that kind of thing. You might even start a bit sooner. Every 1 degree that you change the thermostat on that air conditioner or on that device represents about a 10% change in the costs. So going from sort of 20 degrees, like on a, some people go, oh, I just leave my air conditioner on at the same temperature all year round. It's like 21 degrees. It's like, well, great, but on a hot day, if you push it up by 22, 23, 24, you've gone 10%. You save 10% each time. It's a big saving. And the device doesn't work as hard, and you're still getting comfort. And that's what we want. Okay, so we've gone through a whole topic there. I've taken a bit of time. We're about to hit the hot water. I wonder if there's any really significant questions we should look at, or should I keep moving? No, definitely. Time-wise, we should keep moving, shouldn't we? Okay. No questions so far. Let's keep going. All right, hot water, priority number 2. So there's some simple things. You've heard this advice before. It's common sense. Shorter showers. Look, I know that, a 4-minute shower, it's a brief shower. It's adequate. It's brief, but it's adequate. Yeah. It may be, you're going to spend a bit extra time in there washing hair or whatever. Maybe you're going to be in there for a few more minutes. Fine. But aiming towards 40. It's an aspirational goal, perhaps. Aiming towards 4, sorry. If you've got teenagers, look, all I can say is good luck. I bought those little sort of timers. You can see the little guy on the left there, the little red thing, a little sand timer. And you can see how that one's laying flat instead of up or down. That's how my kids leave it when it's in the shower. You want to try and keep, you want to try and monitor, the less hot water you use effectively, the less you're paying for. And so that's the sort of raw information. And I often say to people, well, if you can, maybe 2 people can shower together, that might be, no, actually that could slow you down. Okay, just back to 1 person, try and keep it to 4 minutes. You can install a water efficient shower head.
Hey, it's Sam Kelly from Randwick City Council. We're finding that in previous chats, people have often suggested that the shower is the best time for a song, and if you can try and keep your showers to being 1 song length. That does not mean you can use Bohemian Rhapsody, but maybe 1 standard.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want 6.5 minutes of Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah. You want to find a sort of more. Yeah, that's a really good advice, Sam. Thank you for bringing that in. Yeah, look, definitely. Like find the right song. You got a favorite song. It may be that you're learning the words and singing it yourself. Perhaps you're taking a device in there. Don't take it in the shower, of course, but maybe just leave it in the bathroom. 1 song is a really great way to sort of give yourself a prompt. The other thing that we, can do too, insofar as treating the water that's flowing through the shower head, you can buy water efficient shower heads. You can also buy these sort of little washers. They're like a slight restrictor. And so you can take your existing shower head off the wall, put in one of these little washers, and it has a slightly narrower hole through the middle. And so that means the flow of water coming through the shower is reduced. It means you might not have to go and buy a whole new shower head. And I do remember, some years ago, Sydney Water used to offer those as something that you could order from them. There's probably a bit of advice on that Sydney Water website. Anyway, that's worth having a look at. The other thing is the devices that we use around at home, how much hot water are they using? Okay, so the washing machine's a good one. My old Fisher & Paykel washing machine used to use something like 160 litres of water in a wash. Eventually, when the thing reached the end of its life, I moved onto one of these front-loading washing machines, and it uses about half of the water. So that was a great saving, just choosing the right appliance there. But definitely, if you have the option to choose a cold water wash for your washing, that's a big saving. So you don't need to wash clothes in warm water. Occasionally people have really greasy clothes. Sure, pre-soak them in a bucket or something like that. But you don't need to, modern detergents, modern washing machines will give you a very good wash on cold. And that's going to save you paying for that heat. Insofar as hot water systems go, it may be that you look at replacing an existing hot water system. So over time, your classic hot water systems tend to last something in the order of about 10 years. Classic old resistive element electric hot water system, they were kind of designed to last 10 years. The device you're seeing in the picture on the right is called a heat pump hot water system. And they've come into the market. They probably were around 10 years ago, but they've really matured as a technology. And what it is, the tank at the bottom is holding water just like your normal old electric hot water system. But the unit on the top, it's called a heat pump. That's the same mechanism really that lives inside an air conditioner. Again, this device has a compressor and refrigerant gas, and it exchanges energy with the outside air. So when you turn on this system, a small compressor starts up and it starts bringing energy out of the air and putting it into the tank. If you think about your fridge, this is a good way to think about it. Think about your fridge at home. The fridge is a metal box and it disperses heat and it keeps the things inside it cold. It's a heat pump, but its job is to keep things cold. This is the reverse, exact reverse. It's a metal box and it disperses cold and it keeps heat. That's the way you can think about these heat pump hot water systems. Now, they use vastly less energy than your classic old, resistive element electric hot water systems. 80% less energy than those older hot water systems. So it's a natural thing. They're designed with the same kind of fittings and outlets you would find on your normal hot water system. So it's a direct replacement. You just take the old one away and you put this guy in place. They do cost a little more to buy up front. But because they're such a big energy saver, they are included in the renewable energy certificates that you can get. You get a rebate back from the government on these under the small scale technology certificate system. And so heat pump hot water systems really are the future. All houses will end up having them. And I expect even for people who are on gas systems last a very long time, and gas has traditionally been a good way to make hot water. But with the price of gas going up and homes transferring away from that fuel source, more and more homes will have heat pumps. The other thing that is beneficial on having an electric heat pump hot water system is you can drive it from your solar power. If you're someone who goes down the path of putting solar power on, then a heat pump hot water system is a natural coupling with that, because you get, this great efficiency of making the hot water, without using much power, but you can deliver the power yourself off solar power. So a great device. As I say, the products have really matured in the last few years, so very good quality. Let's talk about home appliances. There's a whole loads and loads of appliances that you can manipulate slightly to improve their performance. So let's talk about them. The basic thing is, if you don't need to have an appliance on, you should be turning it off. Often people use things like today TVs to, they can leave them running. I've been into lots of homes where, someone's walking through the lounge room occasionally, and so there's the TV running. Why? Well, it's, a bit of background noise. Sometimes you might be listening to a program, or you've watched a program, you've got away and you've just left it running. We really encourage you to go back to the radio. Radios use a very small amount of power compared to a TV. So if it's, something to keep you company, then, the TV is not the best choice. Radio is definitely cheaper to run. The other thing is that standby power idea. If the device isn't being used, turn it off. So at my home, I'm off the grid, and I run on solar power and batteries. So one of the tasks that I do before I go to bed every night is I put a little head torch on, I go around and turn off all the power points. There's a whole range of things in our homes these days that are sitting there drawing a little bit of power. And by all means, you might say, I don't like to turn the microwave off because then I lose the timing function on it, or I don't want to turn my, some people say Foxtel off because then I don't get the program updates, or I've got a recording going. Okay, fine. There are some devices you may choose to leave running, but there are lots of devices that you can turn off. And so I would encourage you to do so. Years back when I did energy audits for the federal government, I used to go around and measure this, and it used to represent 10% of your electricity bill. Today it's dropped a bit because the technologies have improved. There's not as much energy being lost through the transformers that bring the voltage to the right voltage for you. But nonetheless, there's still a plethora of little things plugged into your home now, and you don't need them right now. So they should be switched off wherever possible. The other thing you can do, TVs and computers, there's a sort of brightness adjustment function on the screen. There's some really clever little laptops that measure the ambient light and they adjust accordingly. But sometimes you can get into the settings and just bring them down a little bit, because they can often be a little bit too bright. The more white, the brighter the image, the more power the device is using. Let's have a look at fridges and freezers. Time's sort of moving along. There's some good information here about fridges and freezers, something to consider. If you're using your appliances efficiently, then they're not going to be costing you too much. But I've been to homes, many homes, where people have multiple fridges, and sometimes the most significant I went to was a retired couple, and they had 7 separate fridges. I'm like, what's going on here? So there was the fridge and the freezer, pigeon pair in the kitchen. Great. There was the other one in the garage, which carried the leftovers, and then there was the bait fridge out in the caravan, and then there was the little wine chiller, and then there was a water cooler. So it just went on and on. I couldn't believe it. That means each one of those devices, and it was fine. It's fine if they were able to consolidate that down to the fewest number of devices. That would be the better option. The other thing that goes on is setting the temperatures correctly. So if you're going to keep things cool in your fridge, 3 to 4 degrees is the optimum. So it's common that from season to from summer to winter, we probably can vary the thermostat setting inside our fridge a little bit to adjust. We're often opening the fridge more often in summer, going for a cool drink, for instance. And so it may be that you need to adjust the temperature. So putting a simple thermometer in the fridge and just leaving it there for a while, and then just checking on it every now and again, and just monitor that. The freezer, between -15 and -18 is the right temperature. If you overcool your fridge, you're going to make it work harder. And the other thing that you can do with fridges and freezers is check the seals, the little rubber seal that runs around the rib. Now, this is sort of worthwhile to know. And I often like to do a bit of a demo here. I'm going to let it go for the moment. Look at the picture on the right. You can see someone holding a note. It's a dollar bill, as it turns out. If you open your fridge door and you open it up, you can use any piece of paper. I'd suggest just a plain piece of A4 paper. Open the fridge door up, put the page halfway in, and then close the door on the piece of paper. Now, with that, you can take your hand off the handle. The page should just be sitting there being held by the fridge door seal. Then you just pull on the piece of paper. Now, I'm going to give you an audio demonstration. I'm pulling on my piece of paper. I'm hoping you can hear it putting up a bit of resistance. It's actually dragging, right? That's what you want. The door seal is working well if it's dragging. But if you pull on that piece of paper and you slide it out of the fridge door and it slips out without any resistance, then you know your fridge seal is starting to go. And that's something that can be replaced. If it's a fairly modern fridge, then you can actually just get the door seal replaced. There are people who advertise in Yellow Pages and the like, online, etc., where you can get the rubber seal replaced. The rubber seal has a whole series of little magnets, and as the door closes, the magnets are attracted to the frame of the fridge, and so they pull up tight and they hold the seal closed. If the seal's leaking air, then your compressor's turning on more often, and instead of your fridge costing you, $150 to sort of $120 to $150 a year, it could be costing you $250 to $300 a year. I've seen some very big old clunky fridges, and while old fridges were made well, they were often a little bit inefficient energy-wise. So check the fridge seals. Piece of paper, work your way around the door, work your way around the freezer door, put the page in, close the door, pull on it. You'll know in a short time frame. Let's have a talk about lighting. Now, this is one of those areas that's changed. We've seen a great transition through a number of light bulbs over the last few years, and it's been a fun ride. I've handed out a number of light bulbs in the years, and I've now definitely migrated all of my lighting at home to LEDs. So, the lighting companies originally designed light bulbs to last about 1,000 hours. It was a bit of a industry standard. So your classic old incandescent light bulb, which is just a little fine electric filament, push electricity into it, the filament resists the electricity and it starts to glow. And if you make it fine enough, it'll last about 1,000 hours, which works out around about 3 hours a day for a year. That was the kind of, general agreement, the big lighting companies, the Philips and the Osrams, etc., created in the early days. Now, those light bulbs produced an enormous amount of heat. About 80% of the energy that went through the light bulb came away as heat. Only about 20% came away as light. It's actually, in some cases, even less. Now, the lighting company said, all right, we can be more efficient. What we're going to do is we're going to plug a little tiny halogen bulb inside the middle of that fitting. And that's the column on the left there. You can see those halogen bulbs, they produced a bit less heat. And so the lighting company said, oh, yes, we've improved. They're really environmentally friendly. Okay, I call that greenwashing. It's a small progressive step. but a very small, like a baby step in my opinion. The outcome of those halogen bulbs, about 60% heat, 40% of the energy coming out of them was light. You know, the old incandescent, 80% heat, 20% light. You're still paying for heat. We moved on to the middle column there, the compact fluorescent light bulbs. Now those guys were a complete turning of the tables. We're now talking about much less heat being produced on those light globes. So it was about something in the order of only about 20% of the energy that went into that globe came away as heat, and 80% came out as light. The issue with them was that initially when you first turned them on, they took a moment to come up to full brightness. And it was a bit of a pain, especially if you're just walking into a room briefly. It was a nuisance. And sometimes the color temperature wasn't very nice. They could be really cold and stark as opposed to a warm bulb. Finally, we've moved on to the LEDs. And LEDs as a technology have really matured. They're very efficient now. LED light globes can be bought in every shape and size. And the idea here is that the LEDs now can be purchased at high quality, and they use a very small amount of energy to produce light, and most of the energy that passes through, it's like 90% of the energy comes away as light and only 10% as heat. So when you look at the running cost over 10 years, the LED is the hands down winner. And so my advice to you is if you have any older light globes, particularly halogens or incandescents, you might say to yourself, oh, I'm just going to wait until it runs out of life. No, you know, my advice is take it down and replace it with one of those new LEDs. It's a good saving. It's a simple thing you can do.
Ian, we've had a good question come in about halogen lights. And obviously we absolutely love halogen lights because they are just often the best opportunity for savings. You go from your 50-watt halogen down to your 5-watt LED. Someone's asked about if you can do it yourself. And I might just quickly pop in that the New South Wales state government at the moment, if you have more than 10 halogen down lights, they will replace all of your lights in your house for a total cost of $33. We know this because we've done this across multiple council sites now. So if you want to know more about this, get in contact with us or the AEF. And also just to quickly address your question around addressing, or Ian, do you want to speak to replacing halogen downlights DIY, maybe the things to look out for there?
Yeah. So halogen downlights, so often, you know, back up in behind the halogen downlight, there's a transformer in the roof. And then behind the transformer, eventually you get back to a normal sort of 240-volt power supply. So if you're just simply replacing the bulb, the very cheap new LEDs can sometimes play a little bit of havoc with the transformer, because LEDs use so much less power. The transformer up in the roof can sometimes have a mismatch. It sometimes isn't. The older transformers aren't designed to go down to the very low wattages that the new LEDs use, and so they flicker and carry on. If you're buying a quality bulb, and I can assure you, you know, brands like Philips make very high quality LED globes, you can simply replace the globe and it will work with your existing transformer. But if not, there's a whole range of LED options here. You can buy a specific transformer to suit, or you can buy a whole LED downlight, which is a once-off replacement, and it just deals with it. All the other bulbs, you know, fluorescent tubes can be replaced with LED tubes. You know, they now make, you know, oyster lights and floodlights, and every shape and bulb, every type you can imagine are available in LEDs. The downlights, so they were definitely one of the really hungry appliances. People had to cut holes in their ceilings through the insulation because of the amount of heat they produce. But, you know, going from a 50-watt halogen down to a 5 or 7-watt LED, and you get just as much brightness and much less heat. So great outcome, you know, going down that path. So thanks, Sam. Thanks for bringing that up. And, you know, incentives available to help as well. I really love it. Okay, topic number 3. Solar research. We've got a few minutes. Let's get cracking. If you're interested in this market, you know, we're certainly seeing a big take up in Australia. There's, you know, coming up towards 2.5 million solar power. We're talking photovoltaic power, solar power generated from solar panels on roofs that make electricity. There's a really great incentive to go down this path if you have the roof space and you have the finances to go down this path. You can see from the chart on the left, it talks about you can save between 2.5 and, you know, drop your bill by about $1,000. It recommends. Don't worry too much about that. What I'm interested in is I'd like you to pay attention to the top line on the right there. The payback time is 3 to 7 years, and there's a few variables listed under there: the sunlight available to you, the prices you're currently paying, the type of system you buy, the amount you use at home and what position you have, et cetera, et cetera. And down the bottom, it says expect to save 30 to 60% off. Solar power as a technology has now become so cheap. And because there are rebates available, it really is a no-brainer insofar as an investment goes. If you've got finances and you've got sunlight on your roof, and you can go ahead with this, then I would really encourage you to do so. With a payback period of 3 to 7 years. 3 years is for people who are at home and they can use that power. 7 years if you're someone who's out at work. Now, there aren't very many investments that recover themselves fully in that time frame. And if you compare that to an electricity bill, which you never recover investment-wise, all you do is pay them off. They never get to a point where you own them. But solar power systems have very long lifespans and they pay for themselves in a very short time frame. Let's learn a bit more about them. There's some really basics here. Now, I understand that when it comes to apartments, it's there's a bit of working to go through strata in order to get these going. But I can assure you that there's a great movement and a great push, and many examples now available on how to get solar on apartments. Just it becomes a bit. There's a bit to learn here. So you've got to keep pressing. Now, if you have a look at people like illumenergy.gov.au, there's actual systems that, there are examples of how you can manage solar on apartments, etc. There's clever software and technology that helps here. But let's just do a quick walk through the elements here. Number 1, sunlight falling on the roof. Number 2, hits the solar panel. It's a passive technology. There's no moving parts in here. So sunlight passes through and it makes electricity. Electrons come off when they pass through the layers of silicon. A fine electrical grid grabs those electrons and brings that power down in a stream to the box number 3, which is called an inverter. The inverter lives on the wall, often next to a meter box. It converts power from DC to AC power like we have on our PowerPoints. That gets delivered to your switchboard. From the switchboard, you can then use it in your appliances. It's now your power from sunlight coming into the home. Anything you don't use goes out to the smart meter, from the smart meter out to the grid. Someone else can use it. That's the simple elements. How do you save money? The idea here is the more energy that you produce for yourself, the less energy you're buying. And there can be a pretty significant price saving here. Point number 2 is that if you have excess electricity, if you're not using power, if you're out at work during the day or you've only got a certain number of appliances on, but it's a nice sunny day, etc., then that power can be going out to the grid and you earn a feed-in tariff. You earn money for it. Typically about 12 cents, but there are actually better prices out there. So the difference between what you're buying electricity in for and what you're otherwise producing it for can be, significant. It's a great saving available there. We have some resources on our website. So if you have a look at the Australian Energy Foundation's website, aef.com.au, we have a guidebook you can download, you can read through. Very, very good. Spells out all the elements and the various components, and you can get your head around that and understand. There's also, we actually ran a webinar just yesterday, and you're welcome to, ask, you can probably send an email in and say, can I have a look through that webinar? I think it's actually going to be available on the website, Council's website, for the next couple of weeks. Okay, key takeaways. We're nearly at the end of time. Let's just talk about the main things. Step number 1, I want you to be more efficient in your home. That's the mission of the Australian Energy Foundation. To begin with, grab your electricity bills, have a look at the Energy Switch. Go to that New South Wales government website, compare your prices. That's a simple thing that you can do that will immediately bring your costs down. We're all at home, or we've been at home a lot through this COVID stuff, paying more for electricity. Well, let's see if we can reduce it by finding a better deal. We then went through a whole series of steps: heating and cooling, hot water, appliances, lighting, etc., etc. There's a bunch of things that you can do, and it may be that over time some of those are bigger upgrades. Some of them might just be small things that you can take on yourself. There's good resources out there. And finally, if you're in a position where you have sunlight on your roof and you have some finances available, my advice to you is you really can't lose investing in solar. The return on investment in such a short time frame, 3 to 7 years, makes it such a proposition. It's really, in my opinion, it's irresistible. No, but seriously, I think it's a no-brainer to be going down that path. Okay, I'm going to invite you to go to questions because we're just about out of time. So if anyone's got any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat. But I'm also going to show another slide here we're offering some consultations. The Australian Energy Foundation, if you'd like to talk with me next Wednesday between 4 and 7 p.m, there are a bunch of 20 minutes time slots. You can book yourself in through the Eco Living website, through Randwick City Council, and you can sign yourself up. And I'll give you a ring, for 20 minutes. We can talk about your specific needs in your home. So please make use of that facility. Otherwise, the Australian Energy Foundation basically runs a service 24/7. Again, you can book through the Eco Living website. When I say 24/7, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I should have said. But there are 20-minute consultations available through our website, via the Eco Living website, but through the Australian Energy Foundation, I should say. And finally, you can get a quote. The Australian Energy Foundation has on their website, we've gone through this process of vetting suppliers. You can get advice through us. You can be, we can steer you towards suppliers that we are confident are offering good systems. So both on our website there, aef.com.au, and our phone number is available to you 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Please make use of that service. Okay, that's the end of the presentation for me. I'm hoping that we'll have some questions. Actually, what I might do is step back on the previous slide. I think I'll do that. I'll step back to the previous slide. And if there's anyone got any questions, I'm going to open the chat box and see if there's any. Has anyone had a read through the questions there?
Yep, we've had some really great ones come in.
Great.
I addressed one before, but it might be worth you bringing it up about, different times of use, the peak, the off-peak. I've heard a lot of people who are, they're washing and dishwashing middle of the night, but they're still on the old kind of analog spinning round electricity meter, so the different times isn't actually making a difference. Do you just want to speak to
that's true.
smart meters and the benefits, pros and cons?
Yeah. Look, so the meter world is changing. We have old classic sort of spinning wheel meters tended to be set fixed tariffs, and if you had like off-peak, which might be your hot water system traditionally, that would be a separate meter. So it doesn't matter whether you're using power in your home in the power points, first thing in the morning, middle of the day, late at night. If you've got those old spinning wheel meters, all they're doing is counting as electricity goes past. They're not smart enough to be able to say, oh, it's now 11 o'clock in the morning, the tariff is going to change, or it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the price is going to be different. So if you've got an old spinning wheel meter, you'll pretty much only have two tariffs: your main electricity price and maybe an off-peak electricity price for the hot water. Digital meters, on the other hand, if you've got one of those modern or smart meters, they call them, they're able to, so they've got a time clock in them, and they're able to separate times as different prices. And so in those instances, you have what they call time of use tariffs on your electricity bill. The power companies give them all different names, but there can be things like peak, shoulder, off-peak. There's a range of different terminology used for them, but what you'll find is that, your sort of off-peak prices are sort of down to somewhere between sort of 9 and 12 cents. Your shoulder tariffs will be around 18 to 25 cents, and your peak can be anywhere from 30 up to 60 cents. That peak is the sort of Monday to Friday, often summertime, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. till 8 p.m. That's usually. It varies a bit from company to company. But if you've got a digital meter, the answers will be on your electricity bill. And although it's like trying to read hieroglyphics, reading those bills, I get that. You can get some help from us. We have energy auditors who can come to your home and walk you through that. But the line entries will tell you different prices, and it's worth investigating. Great,
thank you. And they can always get a copy of their bill and book in one of those 20-minute sessions and run through with you guys. That'd be great. We do have more questions, so we will keep addressing it before we wrap up. But if you do have to go, because we are on time now, thank you very much for joining us. I'll make a quick comment on Randwick Council is currently developing a subsidy program or a rebates program for various energy saving technologies. This is in the works. So I give you our guarantee we're working on it around the clock at the moment. So we're hoping to have it launched in the next couple of months. You're registered for this meeting, so you will definitely hear about it as soon as it's available. We'll send an email out. So if you do have to leave, thank you very much. It's been great having you along here, and hopefully you've learned some more amazing information from Ian here. Ian, I might read out one or two more questions if that's okay.
Yeah.
Back on smart meters, you might have already answered this, but if not, tell us more about converting smart meters or meters to smart meters. What are the costs? What does it involve? Can anyone do it?
Yeah. So the situation is that New South Wales government watched what happened in Victoria, where the government said, right, we're changing all the meters over to digital. And so people overnight, there were teams of technicians wandering around changing meters over. The prices, suddenly people were getting these giant electricity bills because they didn't understand they were on different times of use and paying different rates. The New South Wales government said, let's not make the same mistake Victoria did. And so the implementation of smart meters is rolling out a little more gradually. And initially, when this process started, the larger utilities were doing that. Energy Australia was one of the first groups to move. And so they'd actually chosen from the market what type of smart meters they wanted to install, and they started installing them. So it may be that this will just happen automatically, and it will happen eventually to everybody in New South Wales. Everyone will eventually automatically get a smart meter. If you're someone who installs solar power and you've still got your old spinning wheel meters, then what will happen is, after the installation is done, a notice will be sent through to the energy company, and then a smart meter will need to be installed, or a digital meter will need to be installed, and that will be an additional cost. But it's usually, it may be $200 or $300. But if you simply wait, over time you'll get your own. You can ask for a smart meter if you want. You'll be directed. The place to go would probably be to start with your retailer. Originally, it was the network, the energy network that managed it, but nowadays it's actually retailers, and retailers then use subcontractors. So you'll probably find the price is a little bigger when you get a subcontractor to do the work for the retailer on behalf of the network. So yeah, if you can wait, just wait. If you're getting on solar, you'll have to spend the extra couple of $100.
Thank you, Ian. We have another question here, which I'd love to know the answer to. It's about people who have the Renai hot water systems. I'm assuming that might be like a Renai instantaneous gas hot water system. And these systems take a little while for the hot water to come through. And obviously this is using a lot of water. I'll speak from the Randwick Council kind of sustainability point. We always just say, throw it on your garden, try and capture anything you can do to capture it. Summer's coming. Ian, do you have any suggestions about what you can do to reduce that kind of initial flow of water?
Yeah, so they sometimes call that dead leg water. I don't know why it got that name, but the idea, you turn the tap on, cold. Here it's starting to warm up, warming. Now it's hot enough. So all of that water, just disappearing down the sink. There are devices out there. I remember there was a device that came out a few years ago, and I think it might have even been an Australian invention. It's called the Red Hot Chili Pepper. It's a kind of circulation device. The idea is you turn the tap on, and a little thermostat underneath the sink is registering what the temperature of the water is in the pipe. And it goes, no, this water's cold. I'm not going to send it out through the tap. I'm going to divert it into a pipe that goes back to the hot water system. And so that's a great thing. There's a bit of expense to running the extra pipeline and installing the gadget. But when people are building new, we really encourage you to put the hot water service as close as possible to the facility. Secondly, so that you're not wasting as much. But secondly, you can often find where the pipework runs around your house, and you can install this stuff called lagging. And if you think about like a kid's push bike, they often have a little band across the front of the handlebars that if they happen to fall forward, it's a bit of a soft, circular sort of tube. So that is a little bit of sponge with a hole cut through the middle. It's like a hollow sponge, and you can wrap that stuff. You can buy it from plumbing supplies, you can buy it from hardwares. They often come in sort of 2 meter lengths. They cost $5 or $6. You simply wrap them around the copper pipe, and it acts like it's really good thick insulation, so that energy isn't being lost off the pipework. There's also a device on the side of like your classic old hot water systems called there was a little jacket used to be able to go over tempering valves. Called a valve cozy. They were quite cool as well. So there's a couple of ways it can be treated. Have a bit of a hunt around on websites. The lagging stuff is really, it's a home handyman job or home handy person job. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ian. We're sure there's going to be more questions as well. And we know in Randwick we have a lot of renters, we have a lot of apartments. Often, like navigating that space can be really tricky. What can you do with landlords? What can you do if you're in an apartment trying to install insulation, etc. We can obviously help you out with all these questions. Please have a think of what's using energy in your house, what you want to do, and give Ian a call this Wednesday between 4 p.m. 7 p.m. We'll answer all your questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. We'll send an email out to everyone with a copy of the slides, copy of the presentation. It's been great. Thank you very much, Ian.
No worries. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the other presentations that are on.
Yes, please do.
Thank you.
Catch you, everyone.
Bye-bye.